The road that we are on right now is called Portage Glacier Highway, and this is what will eventually lead us to the longest highway tunnel in the United States. And no, this tunnel that you see right here is not it, but the views coming out of this tunnel were pretty spectacular, which is why I wanted to include it. And for those of you wondering where we are today, let me show you. This video is being filmed in the beautiful state of Alaska, and we're about an hour and a half south of Anchorage. Our journey starts right about here, and we'll be making our way through the 2.5-mile long tunnel all the way to the quaint little town of Whittier, Alaska. And it's a very unique town for a variety of reasons, but there's one thing in particular that stands out. Now, before we can enter the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel, we will have to pay a small fee. And there is a sign posted just before the fee station, so you can see exactly what you have to pay before entry. So this is the sign right here that lets you know how much you have to pay to enter the tunnel. We are a Class A vehicle, so we are going to be paying $13. But as you can see, you can pay all the way up to $330. After paying our fee to the lovely attendant at the pay station, it was finally time to enter the tunnel. One thing you'll notice right off the bat is that there is a railroad that goes through this tunnel, and that's because it is a shared tunnel used for everyday vehicles and trains. And I know what you're probably thinking, what if a train comes through here? Are we screwed? Well, no. It is a one-way tunnel and traffic rotates back and forth about every half hour, and when a train is scheduled to enter the tunnel, they simply close it off to vehicles until the train is passed. That way, we don't have to worry about a head on collision and dying a very painful death as our screams echo throughout the cold, dark tunnel. That might have been a bit much. Construction on the tunnel began in 1941 and it was originally built for military purposes. You see, Alaska was a point of interest during World War II, being that it was the closest point in North America to Japan. At the same time, it also served as a strategic defense point against potential attacks from Japan in the Pacific. During World War II, the little port town of Seward played a vital role in the military buildup. Seward was the main access point to south central Alaska, and many war supplies, equipment, materials, etc. were shipped here from Seattle. And by the way, Seward is a gorgeous little town that I just may be uploading a video on in the future. Back to the story. As World War II continued on, the US Army was scouting out additional ports to move troops and supplies to in the event that Seward were to become inaccessible. The location of what is now Whittier was chosen for a few reasons. Number one, it was a shorter trip when it came to shipping supplies. Two, there was less chance of being spotted by Japanese submarines. Number three, the location reduced risk of attack due to the very unpredictable and harsh weather. And number four, just like Seward, the water in the bay does not freeze, making it navigable year-round. As stated earlier, construction began in 1941, and at the forefront of the project was Army engineer Anton Anderson, hence the name of the tunnel. The entire project ended up costing around $5.3 million, and on April 23, 1943, the project had been completed. This finally connected Whittier to inner Alaska via a rail line, and I'll show you on a map. The yellow line here represents the rail line that connected Seward to Fairbanks, Alaska, which was completed in 1923. And once the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel was completed, this connected Whittier to the already existing rail line, further expanding and accelerating development in Alaska. The height of the tunnel at the center is 22 feet high and has a driving surface of 11.5 feet wide. And if you are someone that is planning a trip to Whittier but you're curious about the tunnel times and vehicle limitations, I'll be sure to post a link down in the description so you can take a look for yourself. According to dot.alaska.gov, the Alaska Railroad began offering a shuttle service between Portage and Whittier in the mid-1960s. Portage was a small town northwest of Whittier, about 10 miles. I say was a small town because back in the 1960s, an earthquake occurred and caused the ground in the area to sink about 6 feet, putting most of the town below high tide level. Flooding eventually destroyed the town, and there isn't much left, other than a few dilapidated buildings. The shuttle service allowed vehicles to drive onto flat cars to be transported between Whittier and Portage, but over the years, the number of people traveling to the area increased. This led to a demand for a more convenient and affordable passage to Whittier. Fast forward to the millennium. Whoa, 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 not that millennium, although that is a great song. The tunnel was eventually converted to dual use and opened to vehicle traffic on June 7th, 2000, allowing both cars and trains to use the tunnel. Now, there is a lot more history to the tunnel than what I shared, but if you did find it interesting, I would encourage you to do more research, because the history on this tunnel and the surrounding area, along with Alaska's World War II background, is quite astonishing. But as you can see, we are nearing the end of the tunnel, and we are just about to make our way into Whittier. Whittier, Alaska. The gateway to Prince William Sound is definitely on my top 5 best small towns that I've visited. During the on season, this is a pretty bustling town with tourists coming and going for a wide range of activities, including cruises, fishing, hiking, sightseeing, and kayaking. Now, I have yet to do a cruise from Whittier, but I have my sights set on it for the spring. Fingers crossed. I visited Whittier during the slow season, so there wasn't a whole lot of activity going on, but that didn't stop me from getting out of my car and checking out the town. I even made a couple of friends along the way. These guys were visiting all the way from Cambodia and were pretty excited to be checking out Alaska.
វាតិចល្មមប៉ុន្តែទេសភាពអូស្អាតស្អាតសាហាវយល់មែនទេហើយនេះគឺភូមិអ្នកនេសាទហើយនឹងអូតែលចាស់មួយគួរតែមកលេងនេសាទមែនទេ
After making some new friends and checking out the water, I headed up the road to check out a really unique building. Whittier, Alaska has a population of 377 amazing people, and would you believe me if I told you that they all lived under the same roof? Well, it's true. Everyone here lives in the Begich Towers condominiums, a 14-story building that has everything from a general store, post office, school, playground, conference room, laundromat, and a church. Amen. It was designed in 1953 and was to be the headquarters for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It was originally named the Hodge Building in honor of Colonel William Walter Hodge, a commander of the 93rd Engineer Regiment on the Alaskan Highway. It was a small part of a much larger project which included 10 more buildings similar in design for military purposes. One of those buildings was the Buckner Building, located just to the east, and we'll come back to this one in a couple moments. Here's a couple photos I found of the Begich Towers under construction in the early 1950s. I'll be sure to put that link down in the description in case you guys want to check it out. The Hodge Building opened in 1957 and was used by the U.S. Army until the early 1960s. However, in 1964, it survived a tsunami caused by the Good Friday earthquake. According to ValdezAlaska.org, it was the largest earthquake ever to hit North America. And by 1972, it had been renamed the Begich Towers Condominiums, in memory of Alaskan Congressman Nick Begich. Now, upon further research, I discovered that on October 16, 1972, Nick, along with 3 other people, including the pilot, boarded a plane and were set to fly from Anchorage to Juneau, Alaska for a campaign fundraiser. But the plane never made it. A huge search effort consisting of the United States Coast Guard, Navy, Army, Air Force, Civil Air Patrol, and civilians were deployed to look for everyone aboard the plane, and the plane itself. But after 39 days of an enormous search effort, it was eventually suspended. Neither the plane nor anyone aboard was ever found. Everyone was officially declared dead on December 29, 1972. And if you do a deeper dive into the story, you're going to come across some pretty interesting findings. But I don't want to get the conspiracy theory started. Now let's go check out that creepy looking post-apocalyptic zombie building just down the road. I was pretty excited to finally get the chance to check out this building, because the last time I was in Alaska, I simply didn't have enough time. But I'm not gonna lie, driving up here felt like the opening scenes of The Shining. This dark, creepy, ominous building is every urban explorer's paradise. Although we won't be able to make it inside today, I'm still going to show you some pretty good shots from the outside from my handy dandy DJI Mini 4 Pro drone. There is many signs that say no trespassing and that the area is under surveillance. I of course didn't plan on trespassing, but I didn't know how true the video surveillance was. Even if I did want to go in, I wouldn't do so without a respirator. The building is said to be filled with many toxic materials, such as asbestos, lead, and mold, just to name a few. The Buckner building follows a very similar story to that of the Begich Towers. The building was completed in 1953 and named after General Simon Buckner, who commanded the defense against Alaska during World War II. It was built for housing and recreational space for about 1,250 soldiers. It had everything from a mess hall, sleeping quarters, movie theater, bowling alley, jail, dry cleaner, library, clinic, barbershop, bank, and many more accommodations. It's one of the largest buildings in Alaska, being 6 stories tall and measuring approximately 275,000 square feet. It's often been referred to as a city under one roof. Just like the Begich Towers, the Buckner building also sustained damage from the 1964 earthquake, but the damage was minimal and the building resisted due to a strong foundation and build. Military operations continued here until 1966. After that, the ownership of the building had exchanged hands several times and was even considered to be a state prison, but that never happened. By the 1980s, the building started to fall into a state of disrepair, succumbing to the elements. There was already minimal damage due to the earthquake, and many of the windows had already been knocked out. Water started making its way in, moss was growing, vandals started to get a hold of the place, and so did mold. The city of Whittier assumed ownership over the building when it went into foreclosure in 2016, and a fence was put up to keep out any unruly trespassers. For over 40 years, this Alaskan behemoth has been decaying in the cold, wet climate, with no future plans. I did read an article that stated that at this point it's way too expensive to repair, but due to all the hazardous building materials, it's also way too expensive to demolish. Estimated cost to handle the hazardous materials and tear the building down would be between $20 and $25 million. I hope they never tear it down though, because for one, it's just a really cool looking building, and two, it holds so much historical value. In a perfect world, if I had money like Mr. Beast or Jeff Bezos, I would renovate it just enough to where tours could be offered and interpretive signs could be put up. I would also make people wear respirators and sign a waiver, just in case. Aside from the historic tunnel and unique architecture in Whittier, there's also the gorgeous raw wilderness that is Alaska. They may have harsh winters and be a little isolated from the rest of the United States, but if the trade-off is you get to experience priceless views like this, I'd say it's worth it. I did have many opportunities to venture off the beaten path, put the camera down, and really take in my surroundings, not without picking up some bear spray though. Brought the bear spray with just in case. A lot of people told me I shouldn't need it, but if someone says you shouldn't need it, that's probably a good sign that you do need it. But it was worth hiking out to this waterfall, just off the side of the road. Alaska is the largest state in the United States, and if you were to combine the area of Texas, California, and Montana, it would still be less than the size of Alaska. To this day, much of Alaska is still unexplored, and only 20% of the state is accessible by road. Here's something you can try in your spare time. Open up Google Earth and start zooming in on all the small communities in the north and northwest part of the state. You will find that all of these places have one thing in common: they all have runways. That's because there is no other way to access these towns, unless you're feeling really ambitious enough to hike through hundreds of miles of moose, grizzly bear, and wolf territory, but I wouldn't recommend it. Another cool experience I had just outside the town of Whittier was I spotted an ermine. Well, actually, I think he spotted me and decided to come out of the rocks and investigate. So, ermines are members of the weasel family, and they are just fascinating, cute creatures. This little thing was friggin' fast and zipping around like an 80s rock star on crack. I think it was probably more so just curious as to what I was doing there. It did get pretty close to me at times, but anytime I made a sudden movement, it bolted.